And we are live. Hey, everyone. So you have heard of Don't Say Gay. Today's controversy is Don't Say Budget. One of the biggest criticisms of the Mises Caucus is that people think we aren't professionals and we don't have experience running professional organizations or dealing with serious financial matters. And while I've worked at law firms that manage cases where millions of dollars are at stake, it's not all about me. Todd and Bryan here both have professional backgrounds in finance that are very well suited to providing financial guidance for the Libertarian Party. They're both running for positions on the LNC, and I thought it would be really great to hear some of their perspectives. Bryan, maybe you can start by sharing a little bit about yourself to everyone.
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity. So I retired about 7 years ago from a 35-year career in the bowels of investment research, of digging through 100-page legal documents. I also, my primary responsibility was to forecast both income statement, cash flow statements, and stock prices for a number of companies in the food, beverage, restaurant, supermarket arena. I was essentially trained as an agricultural economist. And did that for 35 years, lived in Atlanta most of that so I could have a reasonable work-life balance. And we raised 2 kids who are now adults, and I got 2 grandchildren. And I've never been politically active, although I've been a hard money free market economist from the day I got my Ivy League MBA and got into business. But the last couple of years have really unsettled me. I have 2, as I mentioned, 2 of the most adorable little granddaughters one could have, of course. And my goal for joining this effort and rolling up my sleeves and going back to work and interrupting my comfortable retirement is for them and for everyone else who has suffered under this regime. And this, the lies and propaganda and everything is just stunning. And the world that I knew for 63 years of personal freedom and personal responsibility and taking care of yourself, independence, is absolutely at risk. That's the driver of our prosperity, in my opinion, and many others. And so we got to fix this, or the long, dark winter that did not turn out to be the case is going to be a long, dark lifetime for my granddaughters, and I don't want to see that happen. So I joined the Mises Caucus, I guess, right at a year ago. Went to a meetup in Nevada, in Las Vegas with the Nevada Mises group. They didn't have horns. They didn't have armbands. They were perfectly reasonable people who had the same goals that I did. And I ended up running for treasurer and getting elected when we flipped Nevada to a full Mises Caucus ex-com. Since then, we've been rolling up our sleeves here. We started with nothing, basically, and we're now running the largest slate of libertarian candidates in the state of Nevada since sometime in the 80s. So we're making a lot of progress. It's interesting to watch an all-volunteer effort after being in a in a private sector, financially incentive-driven business. But the people who I have interacted with in this have been spectacular, and and again, very professional. The ideology is freedom, individual identity. It has nothing to do with the nonsense that we get accused of being, which just shocked me when I continue to read some of the things that we're all, as a group, being accused of. And I keep looking around for any shred of evidence of that from any of the people that I've been interacting with since I joined this effort about a year ago, and I find none of it. And I'm very proud and humbled to be involved in this journey. So that's my background.
Awesome. Thank you. Todd, why don't you share a little bit about yourself with everyone, since you're the man who set off the budget controversy over the last couple of days.
Such a controversy, asking a simple question. Yeah, my name's Todd Hagopian. Obviously, I'm running for LNC treasurer. I think a lot of people know that. My background started in financial advising and bank management when I was younger. I was a bank manager at about 25. Decided to go back to school and study management, really wanted to run companies. So I went back and got my MBA at Michigan State. After that, I spent over 10 years in manufacturing. So I went to Whirlpool Corp and built refrigerators and dishwashers and sold washing machines and things such as that. Got hired on to run a company at Illinois Tool Works. So I ran a $67 million business in Ohio. Got recruited over to Oklahoma to run a company for Warren Buffett. So I ran one of his very small companies in his very large empire. So I ran another $50 to $60 million company in Oklahoma. Did that very successfully. Unfortunately, got laid off in the middle of COVID as we were cutting costs and they were preparing to sell that company. So then I had to figure out what I wanted to do. I took everything I had and decided I was going to become my own boss, and I invested it all in coming up with my own company and purchasing another company. Since then, we have purchased a second company, and we are now a $5 million company that I serve on as CEO, CFO, with over 10 employees and $1 million payroll. And so that's what I am from a business standpoint. From a libertarian standpoint, I joined in 2016 after Trump won the nomination in May because I just couldn't handle the Republican Party anymore. So I joined the Libertarian Party. Didn't get involved in Mises until early 2020. Jumped on with Mises after learning more about them during Josh's chair run, during my briefly and failed chair run. I got to know Josh and got involved and got to know Angela at that time and got involved in the Mises Caucus and became a state organizer in Oklahoma and helped build the Oklahoma Caucus, which is a very strong and successful caucus right now in the States. So that's me from a libertarian standpoint. From a family standpoint, I have 4 kids, obviously still very young, so 9, 7, 6, and 4 that keep me quite busy. But I always have time at night to do stuff like this.
Very nice. So what happened over the last couple of days? You asked a question about the budget that really ticked people off. I think it's reasonable because you're running for treasurer. So
Yeah.
help us
shows,
break it down. Yeah.
It kind of shows that everyone thinks that these LNC positions are beauty pageants and popularity contests, right? Because every time I try and ask a budget question, it's not the first time. Everybody fires back with, well, you don't know the inner workings and you don't understand the budget and this and that. But they can't answer any questions so that I can learn more about it or so that I can evaluate whether I'm right or wrong. So what happened is after January, they missed by 20 some odd % in revenue. And then in February, they missed by 40%, 39% or so in revenue. So now they're down by about 29% in revenue over 2 months. And so I put it out on Twitter. I said, hey, we're down 29% in revenue, even though we hired all these new people. And so we increased our budget. We actually changed the budget rules so that they could increase the budget more than they had previously planned, so that they could do this. But now we're missing the revenue. So why are we missing the revenue? And how are we going to make up for it? That's literally all I asked. And then I took that exact same question and I picked what I thought was the most reasonable of the 3 terrible Facebook groups for delegates. And I put it in there because I thought they were the most reasonable. There's a lot of good people in there and they tend to not go anti-Mises right away. So I put it in there thinking that I could have a productive discussion on this. And kind of hours went by. Suddenly, the executive director did make a statement on the LNC board, and then all of a sudden, boom, I was banned. I looked to see if it was posted and I couldn't find the group anywhere. I went onto a different profile that I have and the group was there, but I'm no longer able to see it. I'm no longer in the group. The question was not posted. So then obviously I got mad and I posted in the other 2 groups. I posted it on Twitter, and now hundreds and hundreds of comments later, people are actually asking what we should be asking, which is, why are we down and what are we going to do about it? Now, obviously, there's still a lot of Mises this and anti-Mises that and blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is I was trying to get to an answer. And because of all that, I ended up doing a lot more research to try to answer it myself, since nobody seems to want to do it. And the first thing I found, if we can jump into it, is this budget. If you take out the convention revenue, they've decided on X amount of revenue without the convention. They took it, they divided it by 12, and that's their revenue target for each month.
So
it's a straight line budget for both revenue and expenses. Does that make sense?
So yeah, it does. Bryan, are you familiar with what Todd's talking about?
Oh, absolutely. And it's like much of the world today, it's Alice in Wonderland thinking. I mean, it's just absurd to to run a nonprofit with a tiny budget in a way that you just take annual numbers and ignore seasonality. Every business, every process, every financial, economic item goes through cycles, and often they're calendar driven. And I know from the little work that I've done, I've been working more on looking at some of the underlying policy issues. Todd's been on the finance side, but I guess I would just say this, that part of my success in my career was figuring out who understood things and who was running their business in a logical but flexible basis, and understood the range of outcomes that could occur on the revenue or cost side or both, and had contingency plans, and were aware of all that, and not just going through. I mean, that's a 12th grade level budgeting process, in my opinion.
So keep walking us through it, Todd. Oh, Todd's frozen a little bit. Well, let's see. Hopefully he comes back in a second. All right, let me pull Todd out for just a second. There we go. So Todd's frozen for a little bit. We'll see if he can figure that out and get back. Internet is a real pain. Unfortunately, that's not something that the LNC or the treasurer can fix. So sort of on the same topic, one of the things that has been really frustrating is dealing with reserve funds. And I don't I don't expect it to be fixed overnight, but I know that this is something that you were kind of taking a look at, Bryan. What do you think about the way reserve funds are set up? Do you think it's reasonable? Is it something we need to try to revisit and figure out?
In an organization that is this small, to me, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, as the basis of Todd's question was essentially, what are you going to do about the real world? And the real world requires, flexibility and again, having contingency plans to deal with adverse events and put so where the reserve fund question comes from is Angela asked me to go through the policy manual in some detail, the existing policy manual for the Libertarian Party that is on their website. And it's something like 90 pages. And looking at the footnotes of all of it, it's been kind of baling wire, spit, and masking tape over the years. And it's an unwieldy document. And again, I went through hundreds of 100 to 300 page documents and had to know what all the numbers meant and all the words meant and all the phrases meant. And I did that work well enough to outperform most of my peers through my business career. And going through this document, there were just so many things I pulled out. But we on the budgeting side, since that's the subject of tonight, they have this process or this definition in there about, we must have reserve funds. Here's the definition of it. And essentially, as I read it, it's you just make sure you have next month's known expenses covered. Well, that's basic to running any checkbook, right? And if we get to the point, and now, Todd's back, it looks like, so good. All right. We were just talking about kind of the silliness of having something like a definition and a requirement to set aside reserve funds in a policy manual that's 90 pages long, in an organization that runs through about $2 million a year, and basically try and keep, I don't want to steal your thunder, but as the treasurer of Nevada, most important thing, just like being the treasurer of the household, is, you want to have money left over at the end of the month. And if it's some month you're not going to, and I lived through that when I was starting out, as many of us have, you just have to make the hard decisions. And so rather than put a straitjacket around a process where uncertainty and fragility is high, it just doesn't make sense, in my opinion, to even have that in the policy manual. But now that Todd's back, I will turn the floor back to you, Angela.
Yeah, Todd. So if you can, maybe you can pick up sort of where we left off. We were talking
sorry about that.
Yeah, you're good.
So when it comes to the straight line budget, here's the major issues. As Bryan said, unless you're selling shampoo or toothpaste, every business is cyclical. We are not in a situation where demand is the same every single month. We have a different number of donors who are expiring every month. We have different cycles in election seasons. In fact, year over year over year, if you look at January, for example, January 2020 to January 2021, we went up 30% in members. And that's because it was a presidential election. Between January 21 and January 22, we went down 20% in members. And that's because it was the year after a presidential election. In 2022, midterm, you're supposed to go back up in numbers. However, we're continuing to decline. That's a problem. But there are certain months where we gain more members, and there's certain months where we gain less. And more importantly, you have to look at how many are expiring. But clearly, none of that work was done. It was a straight line budget. So when somebody comes in and says, we're off by 29%, we have to cut costs. No. We might not even be off. Maybe January and February, we're supposed to be down by 29%. Maybe it gets made up in May through August. You know what I mean? But we don't know because no one's done the homework. And in an hour, I was able to kind of start that process. And in a few hours, we could have it all mapped out over the last 20 years and how this works. And it would have been, and we could have had an educated budget. In Oklahoma, we have a budget by month. And if we have a membership drive in a certain month, then guess what? Our revenue goes up. You know what I mean? That's how we budget it. So there will be months where you have very small revenue. Then there will be months where you have big ones. And then there's a fundraiser in this month and your revenue goes up because you've got that planned. That's how budgeting works. Not like this. The other issue is the actual request to go up in the budget number. It's fine. I actually agree with the LNC that there shouldn't be this weird rule where you can only have a budget that's X% more or less than the year before. That's kind of odd, right? You should be able to budget the way that you think the business is going to happen. Mm-hmm. However, the last 4 election cycles, the presidential election cycle to the midterm, we have lost 25% fundraising in those 2-year span because we lose members. Now we know that happens. And at the most or at the best, it's been a -10. At the worst, it's been minus high 30s. Okay. And for some reason this year, we are +7. So we're planning on fundraising 7% more than we did during our presidential election year, which would be 100% okay if we had a plan. But we don't. Nobody's telling us. Even in the executive director's explanation that he did put on the discussion board finally after 2 months, it was all about cost cutting, not revenue production. And right. He even said in there that there's not going to be any increase in revenue in the next few months. He basically said we're in this situation, we have to live with it, which doesn't make any sense. It clearly, and we're talking about a budget rule that was suspended in November and a budget that was approved in December, 60 days ago. In the business world, if you are 29% off 60 days after you lay out a budget, you don't understand your business. That's the bottom line. you
So-
don't understand your business.
So it's interesting. There's a couple of different dynamics at play here. One is, like Tyler Harris's comments, and I like Tyler, by the way. I think he's a good dude. I don't have any plans to sack him, so everyone can, chill out. But I don't think that he's the one that came up with the budget. I was at the meeting that the budget was adopted by, and there were a couple of key players who clearly had put in more work than other people on the LNC. But I was not under the impression that any of the things that you are bringing up right now were considered. I feel like, and this is just my guess, that the budget is created by people who don't have a lot of solid financial experience. It's just a handful of people doing literally the best they can, and they look at what's been done in the past and they just try to recreate it. And maybe that works for a small business, for something with just 2 or 3 employees. It's literally your private business. I just don't think that that's what we need at the national level for the 3rd largest political party in the most powerful country in the world.
Yep, I agree. And so basically, at the end of the day, the question didn't get answered. That's the gist of how this all happened and then the question can't get answered because there was actually no logic to what the number was that we missed. So there actually is no answer. It's not that we're 29% short. We're 29% below the average month we would need to hit the budget, which is not the same thing as being 29% below budget.
Got it.
So there is just no answer. And that's unfortunate. And it's essentially what Tyler, said, because he essentially had to go after costs because the cash reserves fallen too low.
So I think one of the things that's really important is that we really got to change the attitudes about money in the party. We are supposed to be about, being fiscally conservative, in the eyes of a lot of people. And one of the implications of that is being aware of how you spend your money and obviously how you come up with a budget. And budget transparency is something I think that is pretty important too. And that's something that people get really riled up about. And, so we have to sort of balance staff want some privacy. Like they don't want their literally like every dollar that they make blasted out there on social media for people to scrutinize. I understand that. Like that's not something that I'm obsessing over, blasting everybody's salary out. But there's got to be some way that we can be a little bit more transparent in our budget, so then people understand how we spend money. People feel a little bit more at ease. Bryan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I haven't spent anywhere near as much time with the public financial records as Todd has, but we should have a disclosure process where people can figure out what we're trying to do, and we can show that we are spending money against our objectives. And so if we lay out our objectives and have that be part of the budget presentation, and then when I don't know, do they put quarterly numbers up or just have a monthly treasurer's report? I'm not even sure what the process is at this point for the disclosures to the membership, but we should let them know, even though many of them have never read financial statements and don't know the nitty gritty of what accounts receivable deferred might mean, but that doesn't preclude us from saying, here's what we're spending to grow membership. Here's why we're doing, here it's because it's a priority one of the organization. So we're going to spend, X until we, have to change that. So it's more of it's a presentation issue more than anything else, it seems to me.
And I think it's a great point because so they do put them out monthly, and this is the nice thing. It won't be that hard to implement. Okay, I was talking to Erin Adams through message on Facebook today on this, and basically what I was saying is, because she was saying, the staff is underpaid, overworked, we need more, this and that. That all might be true. Okay, I've been in business a long time. I've made a lot more investments than I have cost cuts. You invest in the right areas, and then you're successful. Okay, you don't cost cut your way into higher revenue. So this is the deal. You need to be able to lay out your goals, and then it has to be easy to show how many hours and dollars are going towards each goal. But the way we have it laid out right now, it's not easy to figure that out. We have our largest expenditure is about $797,000 or so. Okay, so it's about a third of the budget in staff salaries. That is not broken out into goals. So we don't know how many of those are working on fundraising or ballot access or state affiliate growth. We have no idea what the breakdown of that 797,000 is, other than an org chart, which is out there. Okay. On top of that, we have another 400,000 of contractor work. That is a little easier to show where it's going.
Right.
But my biggest concern during today's thing was when they talked about we were cutting costs. I looked and we cut fundraising costs. Okay, so you cut fundraising costs when you're down 29%. Now, I'll be straight here. That might not have been.
Turn up your volume, Todd. You got quiet. There you go.
So it might have been because so-and-so expenditure isn't until July, but because they straight lined it, we have no idea. Okay, so it could be that I'm just full of crap because they budgeted it one way, but then showed it to the membership in the other way, which is not my fault. Okay, but my guess is that they were coming up short and they looked for ways to cut money, and they cut fundraising money, which will have a downhill, snowball effect on the next month and the next month. So when Tyler said, don't expect a quick recovery here, I imagine that's because we're not spending as much in fundraising. So therefore we won't drive 29% increase over the next 2 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons that I really hammer home strategic planning. And I'm trying to emphasize that as much as possible, because the LNC doesn't do that. And so we have all these different groups sort of operating on their own. And, I respect everyone's autonomy. It's not about being like this tyrannical top-down organization. But if we're not all on the same page and working towards the same thing, like how do we know how much money we need for affiliate support, for candidate support, like for keeping CRM running so that it's not buggy and, pissing off half of the state affiliates that use it. It just seems like really basic. Like we should all be on the same page so that we know how much money we need and what we're working towards. And it doesn't sound like that's happening right now.
Yeah, I guess, the political world works on 2-year cycles, and that's why nothing gets fixed from longer term perspective.
Yep.
And that attitude and that seems to be the culture at least on the financial side of the LNC or LP today, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And bringing in people with business experience and a longer term vision of things can go a long way to fixing that, and having a long range plan, which Angela's been working on, I know, for a long time, is one of the major efforts to fix that.
Yeah. And another thing that we really need, and this is something that I'm hoping the two of you can help me with, is putting out some treasurer resources. Like as we start to fix things at the national level and we identify what went wrong and where, we can start sharing that with state affiliates, because I know they're struggling too. This is not something that is just a problem that's unique to the LNC. Most state parties don't have like a solid plan in place, and that means that they don't have a solid financial plan in place either. And that's why so many of them, like the coffers, are so low. Like, I don't think it's because people don't like libertarians. You see organizations like YAL and Students for Liberty, they're pulling their own weight. And I think that we can do the same. I feel like we should be doing better than them, not just trying to maintain relevancy with them. Any other thoughts on the budget? This has been an excellent conversation, and I really hope that it has kind of shown people where we're coming from, why we're asking these questions. We're not about destroying the party and humiliating everyone. We're trying to build it up, and you can't do that until you start tactfully at least talking about things that are wrong.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is the one question that remains to be answered is, are we screwed, right? Are we going to miss by 600,000 or not? And we need to figure out that answer pretty quick, because if we are, then we need to find $600,000 of budget cuts, right? So the bad sign is we've got 12 out of 13 of the last 13 months we've lost membership. Okay. we need to reverse that. That needs to be done now. We need to figure out what our strategy is going to be to retain, what our strategy is going to be to recruit, what our strategy is going to be to recapture. We need to have a certain amount of budget pressed towards each of those things. And we need to start looking at the rest of the budget and try and figure out how much of certain these contractors we can take from their budget and move it into fundraising so that we might be able to invest in those contractors later in the year. From a staffing standpoint, we basically doubled our staffing, if not more, in the budget. We haven't made all those hires yet, but we need to figure out, when are we going to add those people? How are they going to add to the equation? Maybe one of those staff is a great hire and will help us hit the budget. You know what I mean? But the other ones might need to get delayed until we get our handle on it. But now is the time to be coming up with those ideas. We cannot wait 3 more months, 6 more months until we're basically out of money.
Yeah, and that's probably something that the three of us need to talk to, along with obviously some of the other people who are running for LNC positions. Is we need to sort of start thinking about sort of like a build on budget, like scaffolding over the budget, because it's like kind of like we're stuck with what we've got. I mean, we can certainly revisit things after Reno, but maybe the better option, instead of going in and making a bunch of dramatic changes, is to just focus on like, how can we fundraise and make up for the losses?
Yeah, my instinct with that would be first option, but we should obviously study all the options, and when we get more information, make have a real reasonable basis for for whatever direction we go in. But a lot of rolling up the sleeves and hard work and hard thinking that going to have to be brought to bear here, it looks like.
Yeah. Final comment on budget, which is really long and took up most of the screen, is like another concern about transparency regarding staff salary and a cost benefit analysis. I think something we should probably do is a cost benefit analysis on a lot of these concerns. And I think that that's reasonable. Again, you don't know the answers till you start digging in and asking the questions, and we can do that without being jerks about it, but it does have to be done.
Yeah, and look, I one of the underlying failures and risk for the future of the West is the loss of the instinct of doing cost benefit analysis.
Yes,
every business, every situation, every important decision must have if it involves money, it must have a legitimate cost benefit analysis, and the costs have to be explored, understood, measured, put probabilities around them, and do it in a professional and sophisticated way. Other than the alternative is throwing darts at the wall, and that appears to be how we got the party has gotten where it is at the moment financially.
Yep. I want us to be, obviously, we're the Libertarian political party. We need to win elections. Okay. Another thing that I think is really important is for us to start kind of sharing about financial literacy. I really like Austrian economics. So I know the two of you do too as well. And I want to be a good example. And it doesn't feel like we're a good example right now. And at this point, it's like, I'm not even going to blame anyone. We don't know whose fault it is. This has been the MO for probably so long. I don't know if we can point at someone and say, you screwed this up, it's your fault. But moving forward, I just want us to do better for our own organization and obviously, for our reputation, and so that we can influence people the right way.
And importantly, this is not an effort to, find whether it was Colonel Mustard or not that had the candlestick. We're not looking for scapegoats. We're looking for a change in procedures and policies and systems that end up making the organization strong and sustainable.
Absolutely. So we're wrapping up. We are going to do another live stream in a couple weeks where we're just talking about marketing, and with some of the other LNC members who are really passionate about marketing and spreading the good word, and how that connects with affiliate support and how we can be good resources for candidates. So look out for that. Bryan Elliott is running for at-large for the Libertarian National Committee. He is also the treasurer for the state of Nevada's Libertarian Party. Todd is the treasurer in the Oklahoma Libertarian Party. So we are bringing out some big guns. I am very optimistic. I'm very optimistic and delighted to have both of them running with me, and I'll definitely be leaning on them for advice. One of the things that I'm definitely going to be doing going forward when I'm elected chair is keeping all of my officers and executive committee and region reps in the loop on any of my decisions, and really just relying on their advice, which is not something that we've seen happen at the LNC, over the last few chairs. So I want to be making that cultural change. And as you can see, they're really experienced. And I think I'm very optimistic for our future. So thank you guys for joining me with this. I'm looking forward to doing a few more live streams before we get to Reno and letting people get to meet you, become familiar with you, and feel comfortable about our leadership in the future. Goodbye, everyone, and we will chat with you again next time.
Thank you.
Good evening.